Media Track, Episode 3. Welcome, viewers. Today I have with me, as usual, Devika Sequeira, and she's going to start with the issue of the Coastal Zone Management Plan.
Yeah, uh, we talked about this last week when the assembly is on. This has been the sort of major issue, the headline that's been taking a lot of space in the assembly discussions. So the main point is that after all these, stakeholder meetings that the minister environment minister Nilesh Cabral tried to address, and most of them he wasn't even allowed to address. He went to NCSMS. So NCSMS stands for the National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management in Chennai, and he said that there were too many discrepancies in the draft and these had to be addressed. And he said they agreed to that there were discrepancies, but they couldn't address them and they have to be addressed to the center. So now the whole issue will go to the center, and but the stakeholder meetings are still going on. But one interesting aspect of this, is the Chief Minister said that there is need for immediate finalization of the Coastal Zone Management Plan, because there are so many projects waiting to be cleared, etc. And at the same time, the Chief Minister talked about, he says the licenses for the Goa shacks will be held up till the Coastal Zone Management Plan is cleared. And this has had a lot of reaction from the shack owners, etc., who feel, their business will be affected. So it's
a very complex issue and tough to keep track of.
It is a very complex
but it would be affecting a lot of people.
And every village is literally up in arms, and they feel they're being given the short shrift, and their concerns are not being taken into account. And the public hearings are still to be held. So I don't know how this will go on and on for a while for sure.
My most interesting story was one positive story in that sense. That's Dr. Louis Dias and his experiment for teaching simple children, poor children, maybe even from deprived homes, Western classical music.
Yeah.
And this got carried in the Reader's Digest. So, I think it's very interesting that, Dr. Dias has been carrying on this experiment, and he's a gynec himself, returned from the UK. So, if we have more innovations of these kind, probably Goa could be a different place. Who knows?
Yes, that's true. Louis Dias is a violinist himself, and he used to play the violin. He used to learn the violin, and so he somehow got so completely engrossed in the music world that he decided to shift. Which is quite a decision to take in your life, to shift.
But we need our dreams.
Professions.
No? I mean, would you do it if you had the chance?
Yeah, I presume if I had that kind of a mission, and music has become his mission. But
his passion is mission. And
passion. But the interesting point he was making to me is that that we have the Indian chamber, not Indian Symphony Orchestra, and that most of the players we are getting for the symphony orchestra are coming from East Europe. Yes. So he says, why can't we have our own musicians trained in Western classical music, so we don't have to import people from Western countries to play professionally. So that is one big dream he has, to take Western classical music a step further.
Just to flag two quick issues. One is last week was this Viva Goa event in Canada, where thousands of Goans literally meet and converge and have another Goan village out there. And this weekend on the 4th of August is it's going to be held in the UK. That's another 10, 12, 15, whatever thousand people, that's what they claim.
That's quite a huge
Yeah,
number.
yeah, it's huge numbers, huge
Yeah,
numbers. So these are new trends, and you get the videos of some of them going around and showing what the kids are doing and all. It's almost like a Goan village there. I have very mixed feelings because on the one hand, it's like your brain drain and population drain, and people say all kinds of things. Someone said that the Portuguese consulate gives out too many visas and passports and things like that. So. What about next? What?
Yeah, so the other story that really sort of grabbed my attention is the amount of money that has been paid to the SEZ, Special Economic Zone, which was supposed to come up in Goa, and
so they were granted land and the land was taken back?
Yeah, the land was taken back, and then they went to the Supreme Court for a recovery of their dues, etc. So the Supreme Court said the government had to pay them some kind of compensation. But the very interesting point that has been brought up by the leader of opposition, Digambar Kamath, who obviously knows quite a bit of this issue, is that not only have we paid them the amount that the Supreme Court asked the Goa government to pay, but we actually paid them interest with it. And it's not a small amount. We've paid them interest of 128 crore is what the Goa government has paid these SEZ promoters. And these are really, really big time, huge conglomerates that had invested. And so obviously they're making a lot of money out of the Goan exchequer. But rather than take up the issue, seriously in the assembly, the minister, Industries Minister Vishwajit Rane said that as far as he's concerned, the issue is dead, the land will be auctioned. And then he went a step further to say that, this is Goa's loss, in fact. He feels that we failed to set up an SEZ, and it would have really been to Goa's advantage if we had set up an SEZ in Goa, and we would have got a lot of more IT industries, etc., etc. So he says the next CM should decide whether what we do with this land. We cannot let the land be stuck for next 20 years. So,
Devika, did you notice this story in the Times of India about these engineering seats going a begging in Goa?
Yeah.
So that's strange. No, earlier there was a big rush for them. Today we have so many colleges, of course, of differing qualities,
exactly.
And some seats are not being taken up and things like that.
Yeah.
Another story that caught my attention was the one about the Kadamba port, going to be studied by the NIO.
Yeah.
This is at Goa Velia, that side of Goa Velia.
Yeah.
The issue, it has been in the news for a long, long time. I mean, when we were young journalists, in that sense, I remember a trip that was taken there by the NIO and all. But very important historical issue. I wonder why it's taking so much time. But it would be good if they looked at it, I feel.
Yeah. Well, the next issue that was sort of resonated in the assembly for very long discussions was once again the mining imbroglio, as this Navin Times headline calls it. And so the government is to file a review plea in the Supreme Court. It's a promise the government has been making for a long time. And the Chief Minister says that mining operations will start by October. At least so he promises. And it's one issue that always has a lot of ministers and MLAs and pushing for it. So they all want resumption of mining, an early resumption of mining. And there's even a whole editorial in Navin Times which talks about the Supreme Court holds the key to the mining issue. And the state must approach the apex court with all the answers they may want. But that's a very interesting point being made in this Navin Times report. It says that the state will approach the Supreme Court, and the opposition has ridiculed the many trips the leaders of the state government have made to Delhi to persuade the central government to do something to restart mining. So there is no expression of happiness by the mining independents. They say it is hardly surprising that nothing has moved on mining in the last 3 years, despite the lobbying.
How this issue has unfolded is also a big
yeah, but there's one little detail I need to
yeah.
point out to you, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
because in all this whole mining issue, 471.7 crore collected under the mining fund is unutilized. And what is this fund meant for? The fund is meant for the restoration of the ecology damaged by mining. And this money is just lying there with the government, and it has come from the sale of the ore, etc., and all the money collected by the government, and it is completely unutilized. So that is how it goes.
Since we are almost at the halfway mark, just to bring in a lighter element, sometime back we were observing that a lot of death ads come in the English papers. And if you read it, you'll think like it's mostly Catholics who are dying in Goa. Serious subject, not to be laughed about. But I think it's just an advertising trend. I was looking at the Tarun Bharat, and all the 12th day remembrances ads, mostly of in the Hindu community, come out there.
Okay.
And if you read it, like, you get a totally different impression. So sometimes these trends start and they get popularized, and that's the way it plays out. Just an observation, just a comment. Another story that caught my attention was this report on Sanjivani Sakar Karkhana, that's a sugar factory, and the statement that it should never be allowed to be closed and things like that. So in the 60s, 70s MGP government time, it was seen as one of the success stories, but apparently it hasn't been working as it was anticipated and expected and things like that. What else?
Yeah. So casinos once again make it to the to the news. They pop up in the assembly. So one of the sort of assurances given, because there's this demand that casinos be shifted out of the Mandovi. So Michael Lobo, who's a minister now, he says that casinos can be shifted to the Aguada Bay, but this can happen only after a study. And then you have the Panjim MLA, who's now in the BJP, saying that as far as he's concerned, he knows that even IAS men patronize, IAS officials patronize casinos. And that's one reason why, the casinos are stuck here and no one's doing anything about it. But in all this confusion, what we've sort of overlooked, and the Congress brought this up outside the assembly, not in the thing, but and Digambar Kamath brought up the thing that the government is actually thinking of setting up the casinos now on land that is in Mopa. And he says, how can they do it? Because the Goa Gambling Act does not permit you to set it up. And yet, what does the government say in reply? He says that they want the casinos to come up at Mopa airport. Besides, there will be hotels and other facilities, and the passengers who come off these planes. These planes are the only ones who will be allowed to play at this casino. So once again, we have this new sort of confusion playing out within the whole casino.
Talking about which, I saw this very interesting documentary from Australia on 60 Minutes, on a program called 60 Minutes, and it does an in-depth look at the casinos, their economics, and their modus operandi and how they work and things like that. It's a very insightful look, and I think if we want any serious debate on it, we need to look at such programs, because there's a wider context out there, not just ping pong battles between politicians saying that you did this and I did this and you approved.
I think I'm the luckiest person in Australia.
I'm a jet set player, I'm doing life right.
James Packer was certainly dealt a great hand in life, and he played it well. Betting billions on the company he inherited from his father, he turned Crown Casino into one of the world's gambling jewels. But as any punter knows, winning is addictive. And Packer wanted more.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've made many mistakes in my life, but investing in China is not one of them.
Packer set out to conquer the high roller market by luring Chinese VIP gamblers to our shores. And he made no apologies for his bold plan.
I'm really sick of people looking at me as though our business is some sort of sinful business. I am hugely proud of our business.
But what Packer didn't know was that others in the company executing his vision would take Crown down a very dangerous path.
It was all about making money,
Yes.
even though they were breaking the law in China.
I don't think they worried it.
That's one issue. The other issue that came up was, one of our authors, Margaret Mascarenas, just passed away.
That's right.
And there were not too many mentions in the paper, maybe just one or two news reports. In one of the Konkani papers, there is a report on the function held to remember her because she was the founder director of the Sunaprant Center.
That's true.
Sunapranta. And I think like she was one of Goa's best known writers nationally, internationally.
True,
in
that's
that sense.
true. Yeah.
And of course that's in the world of writing. Another small point from there, I came across this magazine online called Junior Herald.
Okay.
And of course we know it as in different formats, different avatars, because it used to be part of the Herald first.
Yeah.
Now I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's sold in the schools directly.
Okay.
So I don't know how many people are getting it or reading it, but the online version is there, and the cover and things like that can be seen online. The full magazine can be read online.
So once again, the Goa Miles, the taxi strike, etc., still continues to play out in the corridors of power, so to speak. And but the Chief Minister sticks to his guns, as this headline in Navin Times. He says he will not get rid of the Goa Miles app, and the Goa taxis should at least try it out for 3 months to see whether it works for them. There's another interesting angle to this story, and it came up again when Michael Lobo saying he's found a win-win situation, win-win solution for both sides, those who are opposing the Goa Miles and the local taxis who want their own, who want outsiders to be kept away from this business. He says that he has this, but he hasn't spelt out what the solution is. So once again, the issue stands to be resolved yet.
Talking about which, I just noticed that Ola or Uber, one of these two in Mumbai recently during the flooding,
Yes.
they have a special hiked rate. And someone was pointing out on the social media that the rate from point A to point B in Mumbai itself was more than the plane fare from Mumbai to Goa. So he says, I have a choice of swimming in a pool in Bombay, which it is, or swimming in a pool in Goa, like he was joking and saying that, So, I mean, yeah, it's complex. While we are on that point, at the national level, there was recently the death of this coffee king.
Yes, that's
of
right.
Cafe Coffee Day.
Yeah.
So there are different ways of looking at it, because Cafe Coffee Day is a kind of a favorite meeting place, a refreshing place for many in the middle class. And while we kind of appreciate the quality and the cost and things like that, we don't sometimes think where the money is coming from. So apparently they had a huge amount of loans and things like that.
Enormous amounts of debts, and then he had also diversified into so many. He had gone into Mindtree, the IT company, and hotels and so many things.
So the way these things work, these new economy, like whether it's Amazon, whether it's Swiggy, whether it's a lot of new products, Ola, Uber and all that. So the middle class feels that you're getting a very good deal, but you don't know where the money is coming from, how sustainable it is, whether it's going to last, whether it's going to undercut the other competition or whatever. So what next from you?
Yeah, so the Kala Academy issue, the minister, Art and Culture Minister Govind Gaude, he got a lot of flack for it, and it became a huge storm in the assembly as well. But Gaude said that he never said that the Kala Academy would be demolished. It is gone for a structural audit. The first audit done by the Goa Engineering College had suggested the structure needed strengthening. So now he's asking for a second audit by the GSIDC. And he said no hasty decision will be taken. A lot of people will be consulted, including journalists who've written a lot about this subject. So obviously he's been feeling the pressure of so much criticism.
But then we journalists are not experts in that sense. At the most we can echo, what others are saying, and if we do a good job, there is some chance of having a debate going.
That's true.
But also it can get waylaid along the way.
Yeah.
Talking about journalism, I'd just like to point to this website called the goanvoice.org.uk, which is of course run by a friend of ours called Eddie Fernandez. He became a friend because of the media thing. And not that I'm plugging for it, but it's the one-stop shop, the best place where you can get a 180, 360
Wide
degree
range
view.
of stories, that's true.
Relating to the Goan diaspora. A little bit of news coming from Goa. So Eddie has this formula where he just picks up stories and puts links to them.
Yeah.
And he kind of replicates them, and he spends a lot of hours. He's been doing this for 20-25 years now, maybe almost. And so it's a very interesting place. One story that I picked up from there was about this interview with Air Asia Tony Fernandez, who is part Goan and he runs this huge airlines. He's been getting both good and bad coverage. Alternatively, it seems like Keith Vass and others. But the fact that he bought this airline for 1 Malaysian ringgit and turned it around and things like that, it's also, some things to be admired there.
Yeah, obviously.
Some role models.
Absolutely. Political story that is playing out right now, it's the fallout of what has happened with the BJP getting this huge majority with defections from the Congress. So there's been a lot of pressure on the Goa forward. And the Times of India has this very interesting story which says that, Vijay Sardesai is getting marginalized more and more as Damu Naik, who was his rival in Fatorda. And Damu had defeated Vijay in the past, and Vijay defeated him in the last election. So I think in the last 2 elections, right, Vijay won in 2012 and 2017. But now his role in politics is getting quite a bit marginalized. So there's been a fallout of that, and the fallout of that is being played out in the Margao Municipal Council, where the
and
BJP...
in the Ravindra Bhavan also.
Yeah, where the BJP and Congress are tying up and giving the current mayor of Margao quite a hard time. And also, there is also, there's all these reports about very stormy meetings in the Margao civic meet, etc. And the next fallout, of course, is the Ravindra Bhavan, which has 2 chairman and vice chairman of Ravindra Bhavan, that is Prashant Naik and Shayesh Palandikar. They are saying that we will not step down. Our term is for 3 years. We want to stay put till our term ends, and no one can ask us to step down, etc. So, that kind of politics is now playing out in Margao and Fatorda, which is quite interesting actually.
The wider issue that raises is about the role of political appointees in all these posts. And
exactly.
That
is a very interesting, very good point to make.
No, the argument is that of course they represent the people's views, but then I think it could also get waylaid, somewhere along the way.
Yeah, that's true.
Talking about some good news, because I think our papers have an overdose of bad news, and when it hits you in the morning, it's a bit of a problem. So there's this story in the Navin Times where this young couple, Martin De Costa from Vasco and Ivana Gomes from Lutoli, are being sent to Edinburgh to represent India at the dancing competition there.
Yeah, there's one story that actually, had a lot of mileage on WhatsApp, but somehow didn't make it to the papers, except for a small report in the Herald, which talked of the deputy speaker caught in a citizenship tangle. So the deputy speaker is Isidore Fernandez. He was elected on a Congress ticket from Kankorn, and he defected to the BJP, and he's become the deputy speaker. So the whole story starts with the lawyer Iris Rodriguez, who has a reputation for coming out with some big disclosures. So he's produced these documents that says Fernandez has registered his birth in Portugal, and that makes him a Portuguese national. So Fernandes has denied that he has applied for a Portuguese passport. I have not taken any other citizenship other than Indian. But the important point here to make here is, does registration of birth in Portugal automatically make you a Portuguese citizen? That question, of course, will be addressed in the courts. Iris Rodrigues has, of course, threatened to take him to court. But apart from that, you see, Fernandes was among the 10 Congress MLAs who defected. So, if at all, this finds some kind of connection, and the story is found to be true, can he be disqualified? And that again would reflect on the composition of this government. So there's a lot still to play out in this story.
So the deputy speaker says, I'm not a fool. I read him saying somewhere that to contest elections if I'm a Portuguese national. So the full debate is about whether by registering you become a Portuguese national or not.
Yeah, exactly. There are a lot of different opinions. Some people say just the fact that you register your birth makes you a Portuguese national.
And there are two countries' laws. There are laws of two countries, each of which looks at things in their own right. So,
exactly.
So it's a very...
well, Portugal might consider you a Portuguese national just for the fact that you have registered there. India may not, but that has not yet been resolved.
It's not been tested in the courts.
It's not
in
been
that sense.
It has actually gone to the court even in the previous government when Glenn Thicklaw and another MLA had been taken to court by Churchill Alamau for the same thing, for registering their births. But it still remains unresolved, and it went to the Home Ministry, Union Home Ministry.
So another story that I came across was in the Dainik Herald, where this minister put it more dramatically than in the English papers. He says, where is football in Goa in that sense, so that came as quite a start. Again, the issue of how do we encourage sports, how do we encourage culture, do politicians help the sport by taking it there, or do they hinder it? Because at one stage football was booming, and then money came into it, and it looked as if we were winning more trophies, but it came at a price. So now I don't know whether the point is that the feeder channels at the younger levels or things like that are blocked. I don't know really what's happening.
But don't forget that Goa's biggest football team, FC Goa, got sold to the owners of Deltin, the casino. So that's another thing.
See, winning is one thing and nurturing talent are two separate things altogether. No, I feel like
that's true.
I don't know how we do it. Any other stories that caught
there
your
was
eye?
a story that really caught my eye. Small little village in Kankon, Asali, where there is no bridge, and these days the river is so swollen that people are forced to cross it with a nylon rope.
I see.
And it's not only young kids going to school, but elderly people. And the photograph says it all, if you ask me. A very, very good story.
I see.
And I believe that in these times when we spend so much on infrastructure in the city and so much money is being wasted everywhere, I don't see why this small little village shouldn't get a deserved bridge to cross over. This again, by the way, is represented by the deputy speaker. It's in his constituency of Kankon. Isidore Fernandes is the MLA of that place, and he says that the file to get this culvert built here has been stuck for very long with the government and with the PWD, etc.
Life in rural Goa can be a different ballgame altogether and very difficult. Now, I think we don't, sometimes sitting in Panjim or wherever, we don't get a sense of what life is there. And it is reports like this which we depend on to tell us the story.
Yeah, that's true.
Time for a few last words of wisdom. Because we are almost out.
Okay.
Any other story or...
Yes, there was another story that struck me. It is the stray dog menace came up in the assembly, and who do you think the minister blames? The former minister. He came down heavily on animal welfare organizations, and he called them mafias, saying that their deliberate carelessness has caused, this explosion of stray dogs. And they are just everywhere. And in fact, there was a very good story in the Times done by the reporter Lisa Montero about how the stray dogs are just proliferating, and so many people are getting bitten in a day. So many people get bitten.
Yeah, I read that figure.
Yeah.
But here again, where you stand determines what you see, So while this view is valid and it is a problem, the animal rights activists have a totally different approach. It's almost as if their belief systems are clashing with each other.
That is true.
I don't know how we'll conclude that issue, but at least for now we have to wind up because the clock reminds us that we are out of time. So thank you so much, and looking forward to
Having you watch us again,
Watch us again.
next
Thank you.
week. Thank you.